Welcome everybody, and this is the sixth and final webinar for Microsoft Project Streamlined. And so what I'm trying to do here is provide different options to augment the video lectures that are on Udemy so that everybody has an opportunity to prepare at the level their time allows. So I know it takes time out of the day to come to these things, so I appreciate being here. Again, part of the training, I'm just trying to make things informative and give you a way to improve your skills and do it in a way that's focused on learning the essentials of Microsoft Project and hopefully do it in a way that's enjoyable. So tonight we cover the topic of calendars in Microsoft Project. Calendars are pretty straightforward. They have a few quirks and of course if you get fancy and get into changing the daily working time from the normal 8 to 5 shift, then things can get sideways in Project. At the end of the webinar tonight I'm going to try to fit that in there, but mostly what I'm trying to show you with the course is how to go into it and use that calendar interface in a straightforward way so that you don't get caught with any surprises. So with those caveats out of the way, the most important thing to remember about calendars is Project always obeys the calendars. So while this is a simple statement, it actually is pretty significant because at some point you realize it gives you a lot of scheduling power, and hopefully I'll be able to weave some of that into the webinar tonight to help you get an insight on what I mean when I say that sort of thing. Okay, so the constraints webinar and the current constraints section is the pinnacle of the course. We start out with navigation, and that's just setting the foundation, and then task linking is just the basic building blocks of creating a schedule. And then we get into the application of task linking with the third module, which was critical path and outlining. And then the fourth level, or the next level up, it actually isn't the fourth webinar, but it's the fourth level in the Streamlined class, is the constraints, and that is the most difficult component of using Microsoft Project for scheduling. And my goal there is to simplify it so that you don't get confused by all the options. Tonight, so we're on the downhill slope into the calendar feature. Calendar feature is a great feature in Microsoft Project. It won't be that hard to get your brain around it, but there are some quirks with it, and there are some complexity that I'll cover at the end. Alright, so just like last week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the videos and that make up the 6 videos that make up the calendar section, and I'm going to intersperse that review with quiz questions and some quick tips. And then after the video lectures are complete, I'm going to go through the Dressage Delights Goes to Europe story problem, and that will help me demonstrate some of the features of the calendar feature in MS Project. And hopefully you had a chance to do that story problem on your own, as that will enhance your comprehension of the content, and again it will get you ready for that August 9th class, where I'm hoping to tie it all together and give you an insight into Microsoft Project that will really make it a powerful tool in your work as a project manager. Okay, so what I'm going to start out with is a poll. Start the poll here. Okay, let's see. Probably is popping up on your screen right now. Let me ask the question. It's a multiple choice, and jump in and answer it at any time, but Microsoft Project always obeys the calendar with the following main exception. First answer is no exception. Project always obeys the calendar. Second option is the main exception is if you use elapsed durations. Third choice is the main exception is if you use resources. Fourth choice is the main exception is if you use task calendars. And what a terrible last choice here. All of the above except answer 1. Oh my gosh, who's the frustrated school teacher that came up with this quiz? Okay, I've got all the votes in, it looks like, and I'm going to stop the voting. You guys aren't going to like me, but the answer actually is answer number 2. The main exception is if you use elapsed durations. And what that means is Project always obeys the calendar unless you use a task with an elapsed duration. And let's see, let me pull Project onto the screen here. Here we go. We put in task 1, task 2, task 3. Very simple schedule. We link our tasks together, and I'll make them all 2-day durations. And I'm going to start this on August 5th. So I'll go to the project information, ribbon command, and I'll set the start date as August 5th. Okay, so there's my schedule. So if I make Wednesday, August 7th a holiday, this task 2, should skip over to Thursday. So I go to change working time. I make it the August 7th holiday, and I find the date. And let me make sure that came up. Yep, it's grayed out. So I click OK. And there you go. It's skipped over, right? Well, suppose task 1 becomes 3 elapsed days. There you go. It's going right through that holiday. It does not care. It is finishing on the 8th. Let's do this way. What's 2.5 days? It's finishing on the 7th at 8 p.m. Well, that shouldn't be possible, right? Because the 7th is a non-working day. So the correct answer would have been the main exception to project always obeys the calendar is if you use an E-day. Let's see, I got a bunch of thumbs down in the mood right now. Everybody's not very happy with that quiz. Just teasing. Okay, let me go back to my next poll question. All right, poll question number 2. All right, so here's true or false. When you change the calendar in any single project file, you change the calendar for all the files. True or false? Okay, I'm going to stop the voting, and you guys are good. Yep, that's correct. When you change the calendar in a single, you only change it for that single file. There is something called the global template that houses the standard project file, and to find the global template, it's on the backstage, and there you see it under the info tab. So if I really wanted to change the standard calendar, I have to go to a tab called calendars, and in there, in the global template, there is a calendar, and I literally would have to first modify it in a project file and then copy it over to my global template, and then from that point forward it would change the standard calendar. Now what I've seen some folks do is they'll go in there and they'll put all the holidays for the next year as non-working time, and they'll do it in, say, a project 1 file, and they'll copy it into their global template so that for the next year they don't have to go in and enter all those single day holidays. Me, that's too much work. It's too much to remember. I don't like having to mess with the global template unless I have to, so I just do them all from scratch. The first time I go into my project schedule, I go right to the project tab and I go to change working time, and I drop all my holidays in right from scratch. May seem like more work, but it's more confidence for me. I know it's there and I don't have to worry about it. I know I've got it done. Whereas if it's in the template, it's always a little doubt in my mind, did I get it right? Nice thing is also is if you're using Project 2013, I'm going to bring that up to give you a little taste of that. Project 2013, while it looks like it's different software, it's pretty much the same as 2010. Backstage looks a little different. So you can see the interface is the same. All the tabs are in capital letters versus lowercase or mixed case. And the backstage definitely looks different, but the info tab is still there, and the organized global template option is still on the info tab. So they've done a little bit of tweaking to the interface, but the underlying guts is identical, really. Is with Project 2010 to 2013, it looks different, but it's the same product. Most of the changes they made in 2013 are to do with the way it works with Project Server. For tonight, we're in section 5, which is the project calendar. Again, basically 6 sections. There was an intro, basics, so that's section 1, or parts 1 and 2. Understanding the calendar legend, understanding the exceptions tab, some quirks in the exception tab, and then the work week tab, and then of course there was a story problem. So the first 2 sections, the introduction and the calendar basics, those 2 videos lay the foundation to understanding the calendar feature. The first video starts out by emphasizing the Streamlined course is set up to stay focused on the essential features and not to take on complex topics that are not going to be used. And that's a constant struggle, constantly fighting to keep it focused on key functionality and not go off into these odd features. So the first item to come up with in that first two videos, of course, was the projects always obey the calendar. And now you know that, again, the only exception being the elapsed time duration. That was right in the beginning. And the first video also introduced the insight that the new recurring holiday feature is flawed. Unfortunately, that was one of the big reasons they modified the interface for the calendar feature, and it's got some serious bugs in it. I'm not very happy with it, but that's the way it is sometimes. The second video then introduced you to the change working time command itself, the calendar button basically, and the dialog box for where it comes up, and it's all about how to set your vacation days and your work week changes. So that's the key part, to get used to finding that. If you're a past user of Microsoft Project, that's, once you find it on the ribbon, it looks very much the same as in 2007. If you're used to using an earlier version than Project 2007, of course, it's going to look a little different. The other thing that came out in the second video was a reference to something called a task calendar. And let me bring up Microsoft Project. And what you can do with this task calendar is you can set up a calendar just on a specific task. So, here's a basic paint project schedule. Suppose you only wanted the paint to be in the evening. Well, you can double click on the paint, go to the Advanced tab, and you may have noticed from the Constraints tab, Constraints videos, I've always had you going to the Advanced tab when you get into task information. And not only is the constraint information here, but down a little farther is this option for a calendar. So you can actually assign, for example, a night shift calendar to a specific task. And that is a great feature, because here, as you can see here, I've got this paint task now going on from 11 p.m. till 8 a.m. the next day. In other words, it's going to work on the night shift. And if you're very clever, you would then understand that, oh my gosh, I've got teams that are in China. I could create a China calendar, assign them work, and I know 11 p.m. their time is 11 a.m. my time. I could have an understanding of when they're working on certain items. So you can get that sort of dynamic going on. Or in the case of the painting, you want them painting in the evening because you don't want the fumes in the office complex. So rather than changing your entire project schedule, you can go in and set just a specific calendar on that single task. Now, the other thing I like about this feature is when you do assign a task a calendar, you get an indicator an icon in the indicators column. And you know how I am about indicators. I live by them. I love the indicators column. It's really the key to me making sure I've got my project schedule where it's at. So that's a great feature there to have with the calendar feature. All right, so that was one of the great things that come out in video 1 and 2. It teased you. It just told you that you could do it. It didn't go into the detail I did here on how to put on a task calendar. But hopefully you can see how that can definitely change your project schedule. I mean, look at the work is getting done sooner. If I did the typical 4H, 1 day, 2 day, 1 day, 0 day setup that I usually do with my project schedules, and have it start on the first day of the week. Let's say I started on let's go to August 5th. See, one of the benefits of running that paint crew in the evening was I was able to get done, rather than getting done on Friday, I'm able to get done on Thursday. So now if I go back, change that schedule to the regular calendar or none option, you see how it then goes out to Friday. So it gives you a great way to compress your project schedule using calendars. Also in that second video was a hint at a key feature, now that you've seen this, that in change working time, while the program comes with 3 base calendars, 24-hour standard and night shift, you can create a new calendar. So if you have a special situation that you want to apply to a single task, such as it's not just a night shift, but you want them to be able to work from 5 p.m. till 8 in the morning, a 16-hour type schedule, something crazy like that, you can do that too. You can create a new calendar, and then it would be in your list of available calendars. I'm just going to hit OK here to create a copy of, and then if I go back into Paint, you'll see that that now is another calendar that's available to assign to a task. Now, of course, I didn't go through all the details of creating a special calendar, but you can see how it's that simple. Alright, so I'm going to go on to the next video and review video 3, which was the calendar legend. That's pretty straightforward. The most interesting thing I always found when the first time I used Microsoft Project is you got this legend, this big old thing is sitting out here on the screen, and it doesn't do a thing. And the other interesting thing in the video lectures is there's a couple of cell types the legend doesn't even show you, and which I thought was interesting, that they're even missing from the legend section. But it's been that way since project version 4, released in 1984, so it's always looked like that, so that may be why they never changed it. So the video number 3 went through the intricacies of changing the working time dialog box itself, and it hopefully you caught the important thing was to watch for what the change working time dialog box is saying in the right hand side of the screen. That's actually where more useful information is coming, especially if you're inheriting somebody else's project schedule, and you're having a tough time figuring out, boy, what's going on? Why is this work finishing at such odd hours? Well, you're going to get a lot of the clues will be in the right hand side of the screen if you get into a situation like that. Not common, but it could happen. So what I'm going to do here, mini holiday exception. So we have our project schedule that's in August, and this time I'm going to make, let's see, 7th and 8th a holiday. So August 7th and 8th holiday, just to show that you can. And again, you see the impact is those 2 days are grayed out. So the thing is to keep in mind that the project always obeys the calendar. Now, many years ago I ran into a project manager from Huntsville, where NASA's at. And I go, well, how's your project life going? How's your projects doing? He goes, I always finish on time. And I go, yeah, right. And he goes, no. He goes, I build a buffer into my schedules. And I go, well, how do you do that? He goes, I make the last 2 days of every month a holiday. And I go, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. I go, surely somebody's catching that. He goes, no, nobody's ever said a thing. So I'm not saying that's the thing to do. You may be a supervisor over some very clever project managers, and if you notice a couple of gray bars appearing in their Gantt chart schedule, or if you're savvy enough to go into the change working time dialog box, you may be able to find out what's going on, and they may be building in a buffer. Now, the good side is there's a whole theory, a critical chain theory about the statistics of projects, and I'm sure you've all have read similar things, where the average project will overrun by 50%. So if you got a 1-year project, the statistical expectation is that it's going to take a year and a half. I think it was P Cubed was one firm that made a presentation on this. Absolutely excellent stuff, rarely seen, but just FYI. And again, I'm kind of going off the track there, but that's some of the uses you'll sometimes see people do with the calendar features. They'll use it to create buffers in their schedule. It's time for the next quiz question, and here's the question. True or false, if you put in a non-working holiday into your project's calendar, that cell's color in the change working time dialog box is going to be baby blue. True or false? I need some Jeopardy music. I gotta find me some Jeopardy music. Alright, everybody picked false, and guess what? You're all wrong. It's true. Can't believe it. That's right at the beginning of the video. You guys are stinking it up tonight. When we went into the project tab and we went into the change working time dialog box, even in the videos it said that the exceptions tab should have been baby blue to let you know that whenever you see a baby blue exception, that means that it was done on the exceptions tab, and it's baby blue here in the grid. And you may be going, well, Kevin, that's a very dark shade of baby blue. There's some dark gray colors to that. Well, that's because it's totally a non-working day. If I was to change the details so that we made those half holidays, for example, which would be a crazy thing to do but possible, And look what happens. They are definitely baby blue now because they are exception days in that you are working from 8 a.m. to 12 noon. And it's an exception based on the August 7th and 8th holiday, as it says here in the bottom. Just subtle little tips here. You'll probably never remember this, but if you go to the change working time dialog box and you see a baby blue entry, you know that that is a change that was entered on the exceptions tab. It just makes it easier to troubleshoot stuff. I'm getting more thumbs down here. You guys are not happy with me here. Again, you guys go, oh, that's a tricky question, Kevin. You're not a nice guy. I'm a project manager. I don't get paid to be nice. Quiz 4. You guys ready? Here we go. True or false? If you see a khaki colored cell in the calendar grid portion of the changed working time dialog box, you can bet your bottom dollar that the entry for this is in the work weeks tab. True or false? Oh, everybody's afraid to answer now. Ah, some of you guys are sandbagging. You're waiting to see what the other folks answer. Okay, it's true. Very unusual feature. I don't know if you guys, if you have any geeks at work that use Microsoft Project all the time, but if you wanted to throw them a curveball, if you put in a half day off in the work weeks tab, let's see, what was the 7th? The 7th would have been a Wednesday. It was a very, very strange thing to do. But unfortunately, you can do goofy stuff like this. I do not recommend doing anything like this, but a half day off on the work weeks tab, through the details, it will come up. Oh, the entire day has to be non-working, sorry. That's how you get a khaki color. Anyways, my point was, is if you wanted to win some money on some geek that is a Microsoft project geek back at work, say, hey, I bet you I can make, and this is a really odd way to go, say, I bet you I can make a khaki colored cell in the change working time dialog box. And they'll go, who cares? All right, anyways. On to the next section. Holidays in the exception tab. Okay, so the 4th video went through creating a simple holiday. And in the video, it was the National First Wednesday in April holiday. And so the point there was to give some tips on how to enter a holiday on the exceptions tab. It was pretty straightforward stuff. And the one tip I wanted to give you here that I don't believe was in the video was, I've had, well, let me make a full day a holiday here. Let me make, I'm going to have to clean things up here a little bit. Let me get rid of that. Let me get rid of these half days. So we have this project schedule here, and if I make Wednesday the 7th a holiday, so there we go. It's in there as a holiday. So here I went into my project, my paint project, and I've cleaned everything out. I've taken out the work week exceptions I just put in and the other holidays. So I've just got one in there for August 7th. Okay. Single day exception, nothing, didn't do anything fancy in the details, I left it alone. And now I'm going to click OK. And let me change setup room to 3 days. Okay, so I've had this experience when I take a schedule like this and I hand it out to employees, they get upset with me. They go, well, what is this? I'm not working on Wednesday, that's a holiday. And so what I'm going is, no, it's only 3 days. I mean, it just goes through Wednesday, and they'll say things like, well, why don't you show it so it's not appearing on the Gantt chart? And so there's a trick. If you, in your Gantt chart bars, if you find a spot where you're not clicking on a bar and you right click, you can go into the option here that says non-working time, and you can have it draw the bars in front of the taskbars. And sometimes that could make all the difference in the world for a project team. Another trick you can throw in is if you got astigmatism, you can do some grid lines. And that can make things also a little bit easier to view. But the whole trick there was right-clicking and knowing there's grid lines and there's non-working time options. There's an additional little trick. You can also change which color, which calendar is showing on the Gantt chart. Now, I doubt any of you will ever run into this, but if you've created some special type of calendar and you wanted it to appear in the Gantt chart, you can switch the calendar that appears. And so since in the night shift calendar I don't have that as a holiday, you don't see the bar here. It's kind of an oddity. For some of you that are advanced users, you may get what's going on there, and you may not have realized that was possible. But just a little tweak there, a little value add. The bigger thing is to know you can put the bars in front for non-working time. Hopefully that was helpful. The other part of video 4 covered half days and multi-day holidays. And again, the key to using the change working time tab is that exceptions are for single days or anything less than a week. Now you can create things that are longer than a week, but it's going to cause you some problems. And more sophisticated things you can do with the calendars. Video 6 is about the work weeks tab. And the 5-key recommendation is to use the work weeks tab only for exceptions that are longer than a week. So you may say to yourself, okay, Kevin, you're telling me that if I had a summer schedule, you want me to put it on the work weeks tab. You want to say it's here, summer schedule is going to start June 1st, let's say, and it's going to go to the end of August. And you go, well, the summer schedule is going to be Monday through Friday. We're going to work from 7 a.m. and then we'll break at noon for lunch, but we're going to go home early. We're going to get out at 4 p.m. And you say to me, that's fine. I can get how you'd want to put that in there, but Kevin, I hate to tell you this, I could do the same thing in the exceptions tab. I could put in a summer schedule. You're telling me not to do anything longer than a week, but I can do that in here. I can come in and put, it starts June the 1st, and it goes through August 31st. And I can do the same thing. The work times could be 7 a.m. through 4 p.m. Why all this talk about, the importance of the using the exceptions tab? Well, here's your problem. If you get in to a situation where you want to stick in, oops, I got that summer schedule in there wrong. I want to drop in another holiday. See if it's going to do it to me this time. I've seen it where projects will not let you put in overlapping exceptions. See if it's going to go here. It's going to be okay this time, isn't it? And as a result, it's letting me do it this time. I don't have the complete quirk in my head here. But what I've run into is I've tried to put in that holiday, and I'll just do it again. Just show you the type of error it usually comes up with. So it says exception conflicts with number 3, 4th of July. They say they use the same type of exception daily or the interval overlaps. So I have found if I do weekly exceptions on the exceptions tab, in other words, something that lasts longer than a week, I will often get this error. And so unfortunately I couldn't demonstrate it the way I wanted to here. So to avoid that problem altogether, the best practice I'm trying to tell you is if you're going to do a summer work week schedule, in other words, anything that's longer than a week, do it on the work weeks tab. And don't do anything shorter than a work week on the work weeks tab if you're going to create an exception. So if you always think of exceptions as less than 5 days and the work weeks tab for things that are a work week or longer, then you shouldn't run into any problems. All right, then video number 5 talked about the exceptions tab and the recurrence tab pattern bugs, and it absolutely drives me crazy because one of the benefits of Microsoft Project in this new version was you were supposed to be able to put in something like Christmas and then go into the details and say you want it to repeat yearly on December 25th and then end. And notice the first thing here is there isn't the option like there is in Outlook for no end date. You've got to stick an end by date in there, which is just awful. So you end up doing things like 1/1/44. which doesn't affect your finish date on your project. So I don't understand why they couldn't put a no end date option in here as a button. I don't understand that at all. And here's the terrible thing, of course, when you get into a year where Christmas doesn't fall on a weekday. Here we're getting closer. See, it isn't smart enough to say, hey, do you want me to make an exception for the year 2016 and make the holiday on the 26th, which is awful. Project should be able to do that. So, and the video went through other bugs with that recurrence pattern. So my recommendation is to just stay away from using the recurrence pattern, because you're gonna get burned. You're gonna miss a holiday, and you're gonna end up having work happen on it, and it may not be a big deal for your project, but us project managers, we get graded on our accuracy, and as soon as you have something that's inaccurate, you're fighting with your team for credibility. So the best thing I can say is you put it in Christmas 2013, etc., and you go that way. I prefer to go that way than to cause yourself troubles by having project missed. Anyways, if you're wondering again what's the big deal about the recurrence patterns and why not to use it, watch video 5 again. It goes through it very well. Okay, the 6th video was changing the default work week. The biggest takeaway there is that you should only find changes to week-long type work hour changes on the work week tab. And again, that example I just went through. So when you're in the change working time dialog box, if you're in the work week tab, in other words, you're seeing exceptions in here that are not in baby blue, they're in a different color, they're in the work week tab. Hopefully the only thing you find in the work week tab is the default work week, which of course is your 8 to 5, Monday through Friday standard schedule. And if you need to change the standard work week, this is where you do it. And you may, of course, again, have things like the summer schedule work week. You may have occasional ones like that, but you shouldn't see much more in that default work week tab. The last thing I want to get into is going to be ugly. And I'm going to get into it here just to warn you. If you decide you want to get into changing the default work week, in other words, you want your project to be, let's do the 4 10-hour day thing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the default work week. So let me go back to the exceptions. Let me get rid of my summer schedule thing. Let me get rid of that holiday. Click OK. And now I'm going to get everything back down to the old familiar basic paint example, because that's a comfortable place for me. So here I have everything finishing in a week. Okay, so straight up stuff, nothing fancy here. So I go into change working time, and I decide I want to do 4 10-hour days because I need to do 40 hours of work, but I want this thing done on Thursday. I don't want it done on Friday. I want to get out by Thursday. So I go in and I go to the work weeks tab, and I'm looking at the defaults, and I want to change the actual work week. So I pick Monday through Friday, and I'm going to change the hours. I'm going to go 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then, then we have our lunch, so we start back at work at 12 p.m. noon. And, well, hang on. I'm going to do 5 hours a day, so I'm actually going to break at 12 p.m. And then at 1 p.m., I start back up, and we're going to go to 6. So that's a 10-hour day. So that's what I want to get. I want to get a 10-hour day. And then I go, well, wait a minute, that's a 50-hour week. I need to make Friday a non-working day. Okay, so I'm back to a 40-hour week, and I look at my calendar. Yep, looks good. 4 days are in white. That Fridays are in gray. That means it's non-working time. I check my 7 to noon. That's 5 hours. 1 to 6. That's another 5. Okay, I got 5 10-hour working days. Okay, and you think this is cool. This is going to work great. And you click OK. And you go, what in the world? Why am I finishing on the following Monday? What has happened? And there's a lot of little subtleties that go on once you get out of that 8 to 5 day in Microsoft Project. The first one is, you go, well, why is this at 8 a.m.? I told it to start at 7 a.m. Well, the reason is because back in project information, your start date said to start at 8 a.m. Now, why did it do that? Well, your schedule was created before you changed the working time, and if you go into the file options and in the scheduling section, you'll find that the default start time is 8 a.m. Okay, you didn't change that, so when you changed your calendar Well, project's got another little thing there you got to deal with. Once you change that start day, you got to go into the schedule and you got to say, well, you know, your default start time needs to be 7 a.m. and the default end time needs to be 6 p.m. Okay, so you click OK. And you go, what the heck? It's still 8 a.m. Well, because your project information, you said 8 a.m. because when you didn't give project a time, it used what was the default. So now I got to go back and make sure that gets set right. That looks good. And then you start to look at this and you go, all right, here's one day. One day shouldn't go. Well, I'm going to test something down here, a test day. And I make it one day. It's going 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's not a day for me anymore. A day is 10 hours. What's going on here? So guess what? You got another change to make as soon as you get into this changing the standard workday. You're back in File, Options. You're back on that Schedule tab. And while project knows that a second is a second, and a minute is a minute, and an hour and a minute takes 60 seconds, and an hour takes 60 minutes, it doesn't know how many hours are in a day. And even though you put a default start time of 7 p.m. and a default end time of 6 p.m., you didn't redefine what a day is for a project. You have to put it in as 10 hours a day. And again, you've gotten this murky water of defining what a week is. You got to now think, well, how many hours are there in a week? Well, thankfully, our 4 10-hour days, it's still 40. In earlier videos, of course, I told you never use the month option, so I'm not even going to go there. So now I've made my changes. I've changed the default start time, end time, hours per day, check the hours per week. I click OK, and everything looks a lot better. And the interesting thing is the prior durations, project was smart enough to adjust it. In other words, Paint Room was 2 days, which was 16 hours of work, which guess what is 1.6 days. So it made the right conversion. Okay, so you look at all this and you go, oh, Kevin, this looks ugly. It's doable. Test day 2. I'll put in test day 2. Notice now one day is 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So once you get projects set right, it will deal with the new definitions you have. Now, one of the things Microsoft does do is in the Change Working Time dialog box, when you get into creating a new type of work week, a new type of default work week, it has a button down here called Options. The great thing about this button is it actually takes you into the backstage, into the schedule section, right into that area you need to be looking at to make your changes. So for those of you that are going to go beyond the 8 to 5, and I'll be honest with you, in IT, I've rarely had to get into this sort of thing. But for some of you, you may be in a different environment. If you have to change the definition of a workday, you got to keep in mind all the things you got to deal with. You got to redefine your start, your end, how many hours are in a day. And one thing that usually catches a lot of people is they forget to go back to project information and change their start date in this where they set the table and put in the original starting hours. All right, that was a lot of content. You've really seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in the calendar feature. And just keep in mind, Microsoft Project, there is no Tiger Woods of Microsoft Project. It takes repetition and use, and I'm always advising keep it as simple as you can. I use Microsoft Project like a Swiss Army knife. In my projects, I will actually have multiple project files. I'm using one for tracking issues, one for my room availability, one for punch list or do-out type task, and I may have another schedule that's the overall schedule. I actually use project like a Swiss Army knife, and I rarely use the resource feature anymore because almost all of my projects are like agile type projects, and I find the agile tools wanting, and I find a lot of value out of Microsoft Project used in the way I teach it in the course. And now for tonight's story problem. This is about the expansion in Europe for Dressage Delights, and it's about using the calendar feature, but it's not for a corporate problem. It's actually for a family scheduling problem. So in this solution, there's different ways the problem can be solved, and so there's no right answer, which is very similar to what happens in a real project. But nonetheless, most of the dates everybody comes up with is is pretty much the same. So again, the company's moving to Europe, and you've accepted the offer to be part of the team that's going to set up in England. It's going to be next September. And so the questions that need to be asked are, involves dressage delights as underwriting the cost of your team being in Europe during the project, including tutoring your kids. So the thing you're wanting to know is what's going to be their schedule. When can Tom and Betty, your two children, start Christmas break so they can fly back to the States to be with their grandparents? And then the second question is, at the end of the school year, Betty heads off to horse camp, Tom heads off to a golf camp. When will these camps begin? Okay, so that's the background on the story, and here's the facts. So for tutoring to qualify for school credit, it has to begin the first week of September, and the children must have 70 days of class per semester. Okay, so that's pretty simple. So we'll put in as a first task, children begin first semester, and of course that's going to go for 70 days. But the thing is, we need to put in a project start date. So we're going to go to project information. It's going to start the first week in September. So we have it start September 2nd. So we got a rough idea when they're going to go for Christmas break. But what's some of the other facts? Well, they're going to be in Europe, but they always take American Labor Day. So we're going to get into the calendar, to the change working time. And our first exception is Labor Day. And that is the first Monday in September. So we'll take that off as a holiday. And then what else is there going on? The family is planning on celebrating Thanksgiving, which is the fourth Thursday in November. So we scroll out to November, and that looks like that's going to be the 28th and the 29th. So we highlight those two dates and put in Thanksgiving, and that gives us those two holidays. And if we want, we can drop in Christmas. And then the other holiday we know we got to deal with is the family takes 2 weeks off around Easter, and so we'll put in Easter break, and that's around April 20th. April 20th is Easter in 2014, so it's the week before through the week after, so they go all the way through the 27th. Okay, so we've got all our holidays in place. We're actually in pretty good shape to solve this puzzle. So I'm going to click OK here, drop all our events in, and so let's look at our situation. So if my first task is right, they're going to begin on Tuesday, September 3rd, and they'll take their last day of class on December 11th at 5 p.m. Then they begin Christmas break. I know what date that is. It's December 11th, so I might as well just make that. Oh, I don't even have to do that, do I? I can just link the two together. There's my Christmas break begins. Duration is 0. And Christmas break ends, according to the story problem. It says the Christmas break ends third Monday in January. So where is that third Monday in January? That's the 20th. Well, that's not actually where Christmas break ends. That's where the children begin their second semester. So I actually know where the Christmas break ends. It starts on, I don't even need to call it begins Christmas break. I can just call it Christmas break. Begins on the 11th and goes through January 17th. Now, I need to split my screen here. And I want to go to the task details form. And I want to remove the fixed duration. I want to go to fixed units so I can use that trick where I derive the duration. I first want to remove the constraint. And now, if the first date is 12/11, then my second date will be January 19th. Move it back to the previous working day. There we go. We are really making progress here. So we've got our Christmas break. Children begin the second semester. They go for another 70 days. You can link those two together if you like. Won't hurt a thing. And now Betty goes to camp. Tom goes to camp. Both of them have the task number 3 as their predecessor. And now it's simply Betty's in camp for 35 straight days, 35 E days. And then Tom's in camp for 21 E days. And there you go. There's the solution. Christmas break starts on 12/12. Tom finishes camp on May 30th, and Betty finishes camp on June 13th. That's it. That's the solution to the problem. Now, the purpose of that exercise was to show you that the calendar feature was obeyed, and if you're wondering, did that in fact happen, we can go back to the Project tab, Change Working Time, and let's delete out the Easter break. And before I click OK, notice that the second semester is the 20th through the 9th with the Easter break out. Let's see how soon they finish. See how that jumps it all the way back into April. So definitely, indeed, the project does obey the calendar. I'm going to hit the undo and wind that back in. So those are good times. You can count on Betty being ready to be picked up on the 13th in June and Tom on the 30th of May. And then the other way you could have done this problem is you could have used 35 days for Betty, not E-days, but regular days, 35 days, and 21 days for Tom. And you could have used task calendar. And one of the task calendar types you could have gone with was a 24-hour calendar. Of course, you know the problem here is you got to go, since a day is defined as 8 hours, you'd have to do 35 days times 24 hours a day, so you could get away with putting in 840 hours for Betty. And then for Tom, same sort of deal, only it's 21 times 24, which would be 504 hours. And now you get the same sort of answer we got the other time. Now, what would be your other choice? You could create a new calendar project, change working time. And I'm going to create a new calendar, 7-day week calendar. And I simply go into the work week and change the details to Sunday becomes a working day, 8 a.m., 12 p.m., 1 p.m., 5 p.m. Saturday ends up with the same thing. Notice now I have all working days all the way through the week. And for Tom and Betty go to camp, I can change those calendars to 7 days a week. And again, Betty's 35 days. And Tom is 21 days. And there you go. Same sort of answer, different way to go about it. Alright, and now there is one more solution left, and that is the summer work week solution. So to do that one, we'll get rid of the task calendars on the Tom and Betty tasks. And we'll simply go to the project change working time command, work week. We'll put in a summer schedule, call it camp schedule, and it's going to need to start in May, from May 12th through 7/30, 2014, and the details will be, again, Sunday's going to be a working day, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., the 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. afternoon, and then the same thing for Saturday. Okay, so that's the same sort of approach, done differently. Click OK. Get a slightly different answer, and that's because I need to tweak the start date. I need to start it on the 9th. So back into change working time, back to the work weeks, camp schedule. Should start that, well, let's start that on the 10th. There we go. Oops, well, it goes to the 31st because I got the wrong number of days for Tom. Should be 21 days for Tom. And there we go, same solution as before. So that's an important way to get an insight into a Microsoft project, different ways to solve the same problem. All come up with the same answer. It comes in knowing the tool and being able to come up with options and figure things out. All right, that's it for this webinar. Take care. I hope it was enjoyable, and see you all later. Bye-bye.